David Rehr is professor of public policy here at the Schar School of Policy and Government at George Mason University. Rehr is author of the Congressional Communications Report, the most in-depth study ever on communications habits of congressional staff. He's also a leader on advocacy before Congress, as well as a past president of the National Association of Broadcasters. Really impressive, and thanks so much, David.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So given the intensity of divided and less predictable government, how can advocacy be effective these days?
I think advocacy in today's environment has to be authentic, has to be anticipatory, and has to kind of understand the perspective of the person that they're going to advocate before, even more so than in past days.
Great. And you've studied communications habits of congressional staffers, issued a report. What can you tell us about that? And for people who are trying to work with Congress on issues, what are the lessons inside that report?
Yeah, there are a couple different lessons. Number one, I've been studying this for about 8 years. I did it as a result of being up in Congress and advocating, wondering numerically what worked and what didn't, rather than just the myths of you stand in the corner and hold your foot up at 3 feet and some senator or congresswoman will talk to you. So I tried to be very, very methodical about it. I looked at where congressional staff looked for information, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they used, and then how they made their decisions. And I found a couple of interesting things. Number one, age demographic. There's a big discrepancy between the age and experience of lobbyists and those who work on Capitol Hill. Almost 50% of Capitol Hill has been there for 18 months or less and generally is under the age of 35. Whereas lobbyists tend to be in their jobs for 15 years or more, and they tend to be older. So there's kind of a discrepancy when you're communicating or you're trying to communicate your advocacy issue to younger people. They may not have the same kind of experience level that you have. I just as kind of a case in hand, I mentioned to somebody Gilligan's Island, and they looked at me. They said, "What's Gilligan's Island?" And it made me realize, the people that I'm speaking with and communicating with don't have the same kind of experiential level that I might have, and therefore I shouldn't assume anything to be an effective advocate.
That makes a lot of sense, and I probably won't talk about my favorite Moody Blues album in this discussion either. CEOs at association, very important. How do they cut through the clutter and build their brands in this environment?
Well, there is a tendency, I think, among associations to be similar. And in this environment, you have to be unique. You have to, it's mentioned by a lot of people, but you have to really think out of the box. How do you grab someone's attention? And then how do you hold it? And how do you then communicate the story in an ongoing way? I think for association CEOs, just the one sheer recognition of the competitive marketplace for ideas is important. Number two, then thinking about how they differentiate themselves and their brand or their good or their service or what their association does. And then three, do that in a way that's easily remembered. Not try to be too complicated about it, not try to be too clever about it, but do things that are interesting for younger people who tend to make the decisions for members of Congress.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of what you're talking about is, especially for associations and nonprofits, is let's partner with a celebrity to get media coverage. Now, unless it's a top A-lister who's in major news, media would actually prefer to interview someone from within the organization who's had that experience. So it not only saves money, but helps their leadership grow in influence. And as a former CEO yourself of the National Association of Broadcasters, obviously one of the top of mind issues is the divisiveness within the media to the business community, to the political community. So what's the best practice for media to defend themselves? And should they not defend themselves if it risks them becoming part of the story?
I think that's a double-edged sword. I think it's important for people to defend themselves when their integrity is on the line or when they're being questioned about their motivation. But I think you should try to stay out of the story if you can. That is to say that the CEO, the media outlet, should not become the story. and be scrutinized. One of the challenges that we all face today is that people are prejudging words and inflection points, how we look, how we act, before we even say anything. And
Of course.
because of social media, it's expanded the opportunity for people to provide input on the one hand, but on the other hand, it allows for kind of a crowd mentality where people can like pick on other people, and there's a lot more criticism and cynicism about ideas and about issues. And everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, many people generally think that you're just bad to begin with, and therefore you have to prove yourself that you're good, which is very problematic for people to do.
No, that is a challenge. So we'll make sure to not complain about social media to the millennial staffers working on Capitol Hill if we want to be successful. Thank you for your awesome insights and being part of this Truth on Trial program.
Well, thank you.